Let us execute an immediate, comprehensive analytical vector shift away from standard tranquil composition registries, quiet character pamphlets, and peaceful boilerplate literary reviews, and plunge straight into the high-octane, calculation-heavy tracking grids of fortified regional isolation traps, weaponized blade engagement loops, and the fiercely protective, dangerously fragile world of an endangered collection of raw operational survival and razor-sharp procedural recovery networks running a raw tactical survival loop. We are crossing the threshold directly into the hyper-monitored, paranoia-slicked parameters of an intricate training maze, an advanced alchemical control domain, and deep anomalous martial power architecture, exploring the lethal analytical parameters of a devastating multi-layered structural reconstruction and tracking matrix with blood and steel, the exceptional, pulse-pounding contemporary romantic fantasy tactical instruction manual and comprehensive baseline endurance compendium engineered by the absolute undisputed global sovereign of breathtaking literary secrets, razor-sharp narrative traps, and high-velocity structural friction, Helen Scheuerer. This high-stakes narrative tracking sequence delivers an exceptional look at an operational crossroad where an endangered primary investigative asset running an unyielding truth extraction loop, a calculating, manipulative shadow network of an elite localized martial conspiracy, and an absolute defense against an encroaching, gender-confined psychological erasure containment zone collide at terminal velocity. Let us map the strategic narrative grid. If you are an elite enthusiast of high-octane, slow-burn creative journeys where endangered, hyper-observant, protective author protagonists must navigate an absolute maze of rigged aesthetic perspectives, corrupt identity dossiers, and forbidden combat files, and a deadly ring of active personal deadline frame-ups while running a blind survival loop inside a completely compromised militarized ecosystem, where an analytical mind uses deep psychological profiling, calculated tactical rescue boundaries, and absolute emotional stamina to outmaneuver an invisible predatory executioner asset, weaponizing highly advanced combat ambush timing and dark generational cover-up mechanics, and where the author utilizes an incandescent, meticulously paced, locked-in-studio enclave incubator, tracking a vulnerable trauma survivor and a scarred literary partner who deploy advanced procedural analysis and clandestine corporate alliances to systematically forge a seemingly impenetrable defense before crossing a terminal exposure milestone diagnostic routine to test our hero's structural limits. This book is engineered to lock you in. Helen Scheuerer completely dominates the high-precision, unreliable witness jeopardy meets suffocating narrative erasure puzzles dynamic, capturing the heart-racing intellectual momentum, suffocating blank-page paranoia, and heavy deductive depth popularized by global dark mythic speculative progression mystery suspense syndicates and high-density isolation extraction grids with absolute technical mastery. The narrative tracking grid zeroes in on the highly volatile, calculation-heavy baseline of our central legendary powerhouse creative assets, operating under a severe calculation-heavy handicap of a total loss of original public narrative control, absolute structural identity liquidation logs, and a completely shattered physical tracking canvas with a cutthroat, combat-ravaged systemic matrix. Behind their rigorous daily footprints, defensive conversational shields, and sharp observation metrics lies an intricate matrix of hidden structural vulnerabilities, deeply buried survival instincts, and sharp high-stakes tactical maneuvers. Their collective defense mechanisms are locked down tight following an abrupt plot outline deviation sequence, struggling to survive an ongoing internal discipline event while managing a shocking series of counterintuitive statistics update reports, their entire analytical focus strictly consumed by monitoring sudden threat vectors from a rogue algorithmic lineage and corrupt global clandestine executioner collective inside the institutional mainframe, parsing complex behavioral shifts in their daily multi-timeline interaction loops, and shielding their vulnerable personal sovereignty nodes from being entirely wiped out by a ruthless high-level technological profiling offensive. The spark ignites when an unexpected high-frequency structural anomaly breaches their active scanning perimeter, while sorting through a series of routine daily operational constraints inside a highly monitored shadow-veiled refuge. specifically the high-stakes, data-swept corridors of the training arenas, the shifting, branching timelines of the Thesmar outposts, and the lethal domains governed by the elite shadow commanders, our primary assets register a total security breach when an irregular selection protocol pulls them down the rabbit hole, and a newly deployed tactical tracking infrastructure initializes an irregular descent into active regional misconduct logs, systematically tracking hidden classification profiling metrics, forbidden alchemical swordsmanship secrets, and unvetted deep-state structural cover-up associations, forcing them into an impossible proximity tracking matrix with an oncoming narrative resolution. Behind the glamorous empire's pristine, high-gloss, high-concept romantic fantasy thriller aesthetic majesty and elite tracking style lies an intricate matrix of severe ideological warfare and a cold, calculation-heavy target containment blueprint. As the hostile adversarial investigation phases enter an increasingly lethal terminal tier across a ticking clock timeline inside the isolated stone dark zones and the conflict-shattered sectors of the training frontiers, the unauthorized discovery of missing historical truth templates, hidden intimate internal motivations, and altered tracking templates reveals that their entire localized sanctuary was an explicitly engineered trap. The standard boundaries of routine industry courtesy and peaceful professional compliance protocols crumble, and our central protagonists run completely out of standard diplomatic escape vectors. They are thrust directly into an active, invisible war behind closed doors during an isolated tactical asset showdown, where a highly manipulative psychological gaslighting matrix launches aggressive countermeasures to permanently suppress their survival data stream and execute their complete systemic erasure. The tactical parameters instantly explode as their social and survival warfare turns completely active, transforming the large dynamic tracking centers, isolated simulation strongholds, and private fortified extraction rooms into a volatile psychological pressure cooker and a physical battle zone. Our protective, hyper-vigilant heroes, the brilliant, defiant combat asset Althea Zoland, and her fiercely possessive, cold yet protective commander node Wilder Hawthorne, are forced to deploy their massive intuitive tradecraft, elite behavioral mapping skills, and raw physical stamina to preserve their focus before their adversary's relentless, calculation-heavy proximity containment phase permanently deletes their boundaries. The threat vector remains purposeful and resolute, shifting dynamically through precise execution guidelines from initial tactical disclosures to final high-stakes perimeter confrontation loops across multiple unreliable points of view, determined to deploy deep sensory manipulation loops, continuous automated gaslighting via environmental and structural distraction maneuvers, and persistent dominance to shatter their defense, only to realize their hardened survival protocols and shifting counter-narratives match their opponent's raw tactical speed step for step. Every midnight archival excavation of ancient combat manuals, every silent choice to stand off against an obsessed warrior collective, and the ruthless command structures carving up divided city resources with ease behind standard structural barriers, and every intense moment of weaponized physical adaptation to execute a raw, unyielding joint survival mechanics chips away at their reliance on original peaceful rules. What follows is an exceptional, high-stakes war of perspective, tactical position, and raw human grit. We watch the Predator Network's deceptive perimeters completely unwrapped as Helen Scheuerer reveals that the true victory requires more than just surviving an initial Week 1 ambush or managing an invasive departmental disclosure. It demands an absolute, uncompromising defense of individual dignity, personal truth, and systemic survival against a cold, calculating machine of regional manipulation and absolute structural supremacy. While our central characters smooth over each other's psychological and defensive blind spots with devastating analytical force, creating a fiercely protective, absolute web of operational loyalty around their building creative survival alliance, a brutal series of close-quarters tactical confrontations, and a high-stakes, multi-timeline point-of-view shift switches the clock into its terminal phase, proving that deep-seated obsession has tracked them to their final outpost. To survive the impending locked grid trap and permanently secure their sanctuary, our resilient protagonists must unleash an absolute, unyielding defense of their final boundary lines. It is a high-velocity operational strategy psychological/multi-timeline counter-surveillance noir/deep-state media conspiracy mystery/high-velocity multi-POV syndicate intrigue puzzle masterpiece that treats deep relational logistics and intense structural friction with elite precision. The tension here burns with a sharp, calculation-heavy intensity. We are talking about that high-frequency, one unreliable witness lie triggers a fatal deadline showdown energy, where a sudden pause during an active franchise tactical briefing, an unexpected shift in an adversary's protective physical posture during a high-stakes standoff confrontation, or a heavy, automated realization that the supreme tactical ranking matrix has completely mapped your personal coordinates, carries massive structural weight. The author writes with an exceptionally fresh, vivid, and beautifully blunt voice, capturing the heavy, oppressive atmosphere of a private executive vault before a major corporate fallout, and the distinct, subtle scent of magnetic master tapes, old paper archives, smartphone glare, cold sweat, dark adrenaline, and pure, unadulterated technological shadows, visceral asset lines, and possessive predator tracking lines. What truly elevates this contemporary instructional marvel into elite territory is Helen Scheuerer's unmatched ability to balance complex, high-stakes relationship dynamics and genuine protective power tradecraft alongside a breathtaking narrative pace and deep emotional hooks. Our protagonists don't rely on unbelievable, superficial Hollywood superhero action tropes. Their immense situational intelligence, strategic patience, and profound survival instincts match the complexity of the chaotic modern underworld they dominate step for step, making their choices to risk everything feel profoundly authentic and deeply gripping. The pacing moves with calculated momentum, tracking